What's up guys, David122 and it's Top Tuesday. And I think for today's Top Tuesday we are going to continue my awesome special nostalgic thing. And that is going over every main set in this game and going over the top 10 cards in that set. The cool thing about this series is it's a trip down memory lane for myself. When we get to some of the middling sets between late GX and 5Ds, it's going to be educational for me because I never actually sat down and looked at those because I wasn't playing for that era. As well as it kind of, it's educational for newer players because they can kind of see how the game has evolved. Overall, I think it's going to be a cool series. And we're just going to go in order, so that means today is going to be Metal Raiders, the second set of the game in the original Duel Monsters era. And like I said in the last video, Metal Raiders is probably the most nostalgic for me because this is the one I vividly remember getting the most of and buying the most and really liking the cards in the set. As always with this series, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the set in a bubble so that way we can really be objective, because otherwise I'm trying to compare old cards to new cards and when they were banned or when they weren't banned and what their impact was when they were being played, which is really hard to say because the formats for some of these are going to be really old or kind of obscure, or maybe it was a set that didn't have much impact, so it's really hard to say how much it's just way too many variables. So we're just going to look at this and assume that every card in the game is only these 100 cards, or 102, or whatever the set ends up being. So without further ado, let's get started. Metal Raiders, go! Number 10 is going to be a vanilla level 4, which is a really kind of an odd choice, but you really can't ignore 7 colored fish in that 1800 body. Ah yes, this was back in the day when you could have La Jin, Mystical Genie of the Lamp, and 7 colored fish, and that was a good deck. There's a reason why that tournament pack that had the Mechanical Chaser in it was such a sought after card, because that 1850 the Mechanical Chaser had was just slightly bigger than this 7 colored fish, meaning it could beat over this. But for most people who didn't have access to that super rare, which I'm pretty sure was probably kind of expensive because it was the equivalent of a modern OTS card, meaning that you can only get it by going to tournaments and winning. So like, it rewards players for playing well, and those players are getting better cards so they can play better. But yeah, for all the other poor scrubs, 7 colored fish. There really isn't much to say about it. It's a level 4 water, it's a fish type. It's got a really low defense, but who really cares? You're summoning this thing in attack mode. Back in the old school Yu-Gi-Oh! When you normal summoned each other to death, this thing was kind of a beast. And if we are going to take a peek at some more modern cards and support, this thing is got some pretty decent typing, meaning there is some things you could do with this card, meaning that it has advantage over some other of its contemporary beat sticks, although of all the monsters in this set that are level 4 that aren't something restricted by a weird card effect, like something like Dark Elf or Dragumo, this thing is probably the most bang for your buck. Number 9 is a very similar entry, but it requires a tribute, Summon Skull. Ah yes, Summon Skull power crept the crap out of Dark Magician, and it only took a set. Whereas Dark Magician had 2500 attack and required 2 tributes for a level 7, he is a level 6, excuse me. Oh, that was so scrubby of me. 5 and 6 is a weird level because it really doesn't matter. They both require 1 tribute, so it's like the middle child of levels. But he is a level 6 Dark Fiend with 2500 attack and 1200 defense. The trade-off here is that Dark Magician might have better defense, but when it really comes down to it, 1 sack for a 2500 beat stick is plenty of attack power. Who cares about that booty? And that's really all there is to it. There isn't much else to say about Summon Skull other than I guess that he is now been retroactively created to be an Archfiend, meaning there is outside support that supports him, as well as I think he may or may not be able to be played in Red Eyes. I don't think it's a very good build of the deck that runs it, but I think you can do it. But like I said, that's looking at other cards and it's not being as objective as we like, but it's worth a mention because it is Summon Skull. It's one of Yugi's signature cards from the first season, so it's kind of silly not to mention him. Thunder Dragon is the next entry on the list. Thunder Dragon's a really weird card because it in of itself doesn't do very much as a level 5 light thunder with 2100 attack, meaning it's kind of like a not so good Cyber Dragon. However, its hand effect is actually fantastic, especially when we were looking at formats like GOAT, where literally the only win condition in that entire format was just who could maintain card advantage better than their opponent, because everything you were playing was a power card. That's because you can discard Thunder Dragon and add 2 more copies of itself from your deck to your hand, meaning that's an instant +1. Now, like I said, mind you, back in the day, Caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't really have much of a use for this, except for the fact that he basically let you get 2 copies of himself so that you could then perform a fusion summon summon of Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon, and I think that was always the intent of the card. Kind of a neat little, this fusion monster's material can get the rest of the material, so you can make the fusion summon, because early fusion summons were completely riddled with the problem of consistency. And in 2800 beater for the fusion isn't super bad, so okay, that's kind of cool. But if we are going to extend our discussion to other formats, then yes, the fact that this thing just lets you maintain raw card advantage is inherently very useful, and this thing saw play well beyond its what you would have assumed its, longevity in the game was. Number 7 is Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest. Both of these entries kind of do exactly the same thing when they're sent from the field to the graveyard. Sangan gets a monster from your deck with 1500 or less attack, and Witch of the Black Forest gets one with the same stat but for defense. Back in the day, these things were probably some of the best battle tutors in the game, being that they added to the hand and not to the field, meaning that if you needed to get something that you didn't want to immediately have run over in battle, just like whatever just died, you can conserve resources a hell of a lot easier when it's in your hand. It's a lot safer, as well as the fact that the targets that these two things can get is pretty much together almost every monster in the game. If it's got bad defense, it probably has a good attack, and if it's got a good attack, it probably has a bad defense. That means this pair can pretty much get anything you want. They have since been eroded, of course, meaning that they're not as good as they used to be. However, they are still solid options for something like a pendulum deck, which wants to put them on board for free and then send them to the graveyard in order to kind of maintain resources. The errata basically saying that you can't activate the effects of the monster you searched or monsters with the same name as the monster you searched this turn that you searched the monster. Ugh. I think so that if you searched like a hand trap in Modern Yu-Gi-Oh, you couldn't just immediately slap it down. That would be kinda good. Number 6 is another vanilla monster, and that is Water of Monix. Why? Because booby! I'm just kidding. That's not true, but no, the actual entry for number 6 is Time Wizard. Why Time Wizard? I don't know, because it's cool. Time Wizard has an ignition effect that basically allows you to flip a coin and call it. If you call it right, you get to Regeki your opponent's side of the field. If you call it wrong, you Regeki your own field. And if you nuke your own board, you take life point damage equal to the total attack of the monsters that you blew up on your side of the field, cut in half. The cool thing about Time Wizard, though, besides being a light level 2 spellcaster, meaning that he has tons of searchable support and just outside support in general, means that if your opponent has a big old board, you can just normal summon this into it and take that 50-50 shot. Remember though, a good player will always call the same thing. Never change, ever, 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 what you call with the coin flip, because as soon as you do that, you are changing the odds of your 50-50. If you maintain steady, the coin is the only thing variable. Is it outdated? Yeah. Is it cool and one of the better cards in the set? Sure. Especially when you consider the fact that the effect monsters in this game up to this point have either been only flip effects, as with Legend of the Blue Eyes. That set, every single effect monster was a flip effect except Exodia is the only regular effect monster in the game. The rest of them were just flips. Look it up. It's super weird. I never noticed it. No, in this set, they actually added some more regular monsters that have effects like Dream Clown, Crass Clown, things like that. You know, some of the best cards in the game like Yatakaru. But all of them had really weird, strange effects like attack directly, or when they change battle positions, do something crappy. Nope, none of them had an effect like Time Wizard, which, despite being a little random, is a complete blowout if it goes off. That was probably kind of a sign of things to come, monsters that are normal summonable having actually potent effects. Time Wizard might have been a little ahead of his time. I hate myself so much. Number 5 is 7 Tools of the Bandit, a counter trap card. What does it do? When a trap card is activated, pay 1,000 life points to negate that activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Ah yes, a good old 1-for-1, and at 1,000 life points, that's pretty much nothing. This is very early in the game, and some of the spells and traps in this game were really, really, really good because Konami really didn't have a handle on balancing at this point. So the fact that you can pay a measly 1,000 life points to negate things that are like the rest of this list, it's really not a bad card. And frankly, this card was still a viable option for a very long time. There really wasn't anything to power creep this until something like Wiretap, which shuffled the card into the deck as opposed to giving you a life point cost. And arguably, that is not necessarily better, just different. So 7 Tools of the Bandit is actually a solid trap card. If you're looking for budget options to get away with something like, I don't know, dealing with Evenly Matched, it's really not stupid. There's worse things you could play. Number 4 is one of my favorite cards in the game, Mirror Force. Ah yes, Mirror Force. When your opponent declares an attack, you can flip this card and then destroy all monsters on their side of the field in attack position. Kaboom! It's the ultimate bait. You summon a monster in attack mode, put one card face down, that monster's got a shitty attack, like, I don't know, 200, and then you pass. and your opponent has to play the game of, is it a mirror force or is it a bluff? And that had been a game you could play with the metagame for a very long time, because Mirror Force was always a good battle trap, and the only times it ever was bad was when it was either on the ban list, which it did spend time there, or when it got power crept by some of its elemental forms, and arguably those aren't necessarily better. Just like 7 Tools of Ban and Wiretap, they're just different. And like I said, I know I wanted to keep the discussion to the 100 cards in the set, but I guess it would be unfair to say that, or not say rather, that I think this card is searchable now, or will be. There's a card coming out, I think Cybernetic Horizon maybe? Don't quote me on that. Before we go to the next one though, another nostalgic Yugi story. I'm gonna try to keep these going, at least one per vid, just until obviously until we get to a set I didn't play. But I remember I was doing a 2-on-1 with my buddies Chris and Matt out on the front stoop of my house in my parents when I was just a wee tot, and I was the only one that had a Mirror Force. I pulled that first ed ultra rare right out of the pack. It was one of the best things I remember of my childhood. I had a boring ass childhood if pulling a Mirror Force was that big of a highlight. But it was 2-on-1, I was gonna lose, I thought my deck was better than theirs, it probably was, the fact that I managed to go as far as I did with that much of a disadvantage. I think I was playing like a big Fiend beatdown or something like that at the time. But I needed a good top deck, I top decked Mirror Force, I remember going, yes! And then I set the card and passed. They didn't believe me. They thought it was a bluff, and my buddy Matt attacked into me, and they both had, 5 monsters on board. I had, like, Swords of Revealing Lighted or something, and he attacks into it. And we ruled that any card that nukes the board, like Darkhold and things, because I'm at such a disadvantage, hits both of my opponents. I Mirror Forced for 10. Chris was mad. Chris was mad at Matt. It was funny. Alright, next card. The next card is Change of Heart. This thing has been on the ban list for, like, all of eternity, and it's really obvious why. Target one monster your opponent controls, take control of it till the end of the turn. That's it. See, this is one of those weird things where it proves that Konami had no idea how to balance a card, because every card released after this card that has a similar effect is just a crappy version of this card. Snatch Steal, a crappy version of this that can get negated by MST. Brain Control and Mind Control, a crappy version of this card that have weird restrictions on the what you take. Double Cross Frog, a really bad support card for a deck that didn't need it, and it's an entire another video I could go into of how pissed off I am about that. Needless to say, this card is awesome, and the fact that every other card that's come out after this is just a crappy version of it really is a testament to how good this thing is. Would it be completely stupid if it came off the ban list now? Probably not, because frankly we have 3, is it Mind Control? Mind Control. That's the one with the guy like, right? I don't remember. Brain Control, yes, it's Mind Control. We have that at 3, no one's running at 3, and oh, it's good for link material. Well, this is the same exact thing as far as link material is concerned, because both of them do not have a link restriction on them, because that's super anachronistic. But even still, no one's running 3 Mind Control except in gimmick decks, so this could probably come off. People would probably run it as a staple. I don't think it would be crazy. But, what do I know? Snatch Steal, everyone complained about that, and that's just a crappy version of this, so maybe I don't know anything. I don't know. Next card. Heavy Storm. Yeah, Heavy Storm came out in this set too. This set's got a lot of really good, like, lasting, stamina-full spells and traps. Destroy all spells and traps on the field. It's Darkhold for back row. Now you might say, well, this will blow up my own traps and spells. That's crappy, Dave. No, it's not. Just play this first and nuke your opponent's back row, then play your stuff. It ain't hard, bro. And that's probably why this thing's limited. It's just an absurd amount of advantage you can get, and frankly, we have a lot of back row removal in the game up to this point. So, do we need Heavy Storm? No. Would I love Heavy Storm? Yes. Because some of the younger kids may never have played in a format with Heavy Storm, but Heavy Storm does actually change the way Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played. If everyone knows that Heavy Storm is in the game, people tend to commit less of their back row to the board, because you don't want to have your opponent go +10 when they nuke your entire back row, your field spell, and everything else. Meaning that people tend to hold their resources. Maybe they'll set one of their strikes instead of both of them, or something like that. So now that we don't actually have that much back row removal, back row is actually pretty good right now. If you were playing a deck that has enough hand traps and regular traps, you could probably stun the crap, like Paleo, for instance. Paleo would hate this, because you'd be forced to have them chain all their traps at once just to get all the use out of them. That's a suboptimal move. Sure, we got Twin Twister and that trap card that does the same thing, and Cosmic Cyclone, MST, we even have Storm. It's a terrible card. Sure, but nothing will ever replace completely Heavy Storm. The card's great, and I miss it. Honorable mentions! Tribute to the Doomed, Horn of Heaven, Magic Jammer, and Soul Release. All of these cards are -1s, which made it really hard for me to put them on the list because they're all really bad when you're referring to card economy. However, they do all have really good effects. Magic Jammer, you discard a card and negate a spell card. It's basically a crappy version for spells of Seven Tool the Bandit. It is still, however, a counters trap card, so it's actually really hard to negate. You have to negate it with something like Seven Tools of the Bandit. So if it comes in clutch, you know, it's either like you discard a card and go -1 to negate that heavy storm your opponent just played. It's probably worth it to protect your Mirror Force. However, it got edged out on the list. That doesn't make it bad, it just meant that there was other things that I felt were more important to mention. Horn of Heaven, same thing, except you need to tribute another monster in your field to negate a summon. It could be any summon, flip, special, fusion, synchro, whatever. Well, not fusion, because that's a non-inherent. Ignore me. Okay, everything, any inherent summon. Any inherent summon. Yeah, not fusion. Not fusion. But even still, it's a counter as well, so again, it's harder to stop. There's a lot less you can chain to it. Issue is, tributing one of your monsters to stop the summon of one of theirs, that's just a -1, and losing board presence is like worse than losing hand advantage, I would probably say, especially in such an old format where you're normal summoning each other to death. So, it didn't get on the list. Cool card though. Certain decks can run it like crazy too, like Burning Abyss can run this no problem. It's actually kind of get some cheesy advantage off of it for tributing the right monster, so that's always an option. And then Tribute to the Doom has the exact same problem as Horn of Heaven, where you have to discard a card in order to kill a monster in the field. It's a spell, meaning you can just slap it down, but at this point you would also have Fissure, and Fissure's probably a better option, if not just Regeki or Dark Hole. You don't have to neg yourself as much in order to use them, but even still, you know, I felt it couldn't make it. And the #1 best card in Metal Raiders is Larva Moth, the best card in the game. No, it's not. It's actually awful, if not one of the worst cards in the game. No, the real #1 is Solemn Judgment. I really don't know why I would ever need to explain this to anybody. It's a counter trap card that says when a monster would be summoned or a spell or trap's effect is activated, pay half your life points and negate it and destroy it. Basically, anything and everything that your opponent does, you can just pay half your life points and negate it. Early in the duel, you pay 4K for something that can be a bad play, depending on what you're negating. If you're negating something that's gonna make them lose next turn because they couldn't establish a board, I'll pay 7,000 life points for that if I'm just gonna win anyway, but you have to be careful early duel. But late duel, when you have like 1,000 life points left and your opponent's trying to make some clutch comeback play, you're just like, Judgment for 500 life points, stop your entire turn. That's some value. Which actually might be why the card was on the ban list for so long, because the card's cost gets less and less steep and matters less and less the less life points you have. So, you know, it's a really solid card. And it's back to 1, and pretty much everyone's playing it at 1, because if you're not putting any traps in your deck and you have 1 extra spot, at least put this in, because this covers pretty much all your bases. This will negate all the other stuff that Magic Jammer and Seven Tools the Bandit were negating, plus summons that Horn of Heaven was trying to negate, so, and it's all just a 1-for-1. It's all just better card economy. But anyway, guys, that was the list. Metal Raiders, like I said, is one of my favorite sets, and it's actually funny to see how many cards in the set are still, like, kind of viable today, and some of them are viable today, and some of them are banned still. Oh, early Konami, you clumsy goofballs. So hey guys, let me know in the comments below what you guys think of the list, and remember guys, if you don't troll the better who will, I will see you guys next time.
Wait just a moment. I can see you were about to click the subscribe button. Was I right? Tell me I was right. I was right? My Millennium Eye lets me see everything, including these other videos by Davy Boy. Don't be a stranger. You will always be welcome in my Toon World.